Stuart Agnew, UKIP MEP, what do you make of the outbursts over the weekend during your party conference involving Godfrey Bloom?
Well, it's not the first one, and when I saw on the brochure that he was going to have a fringe meeting and it was going to be about women's issues, I thought there will probably be fireworks of one sort or another, and so they were. He made a very unfortunate remark, and that went on to other events, and that's not the first time. We removed the whip from him because of that. He has now left the party. I would have liked the opportunity for us all to have sat down with him at the next Strasbourg session and said, look, Godfrey, the next time is it. But he's chosen to jump. And I want to actually pay tribute to what he did for our party. He helped...
No, I'll ask you that in a minute. I will ask you about what you make of him as a colleague. But I just wanted to pick up on some of the things you were saying, kind of to get some brief answers if you can. Do you think then it was the right decision for him to make, to step down, to decide to go independent at this stage, given the furore that his comments created?
I think that it would have been the right step to have stepped down after we'd had a really good word with him. I don't like the way it's happened that he has decided to go, and of course I don't like the fact that he's gone independent, which means he will stand against a UKIP candidate or a UKIP list of candidates in Yorkshire in a few months' time. That's something I really would have wanted to avoid, but there again, it's happened.
And he's not clear yet as to whether he will certainly stand in the election next year. Is that something you're expecting him to do, even though it won't be on a UKIP ticket?
I'm pleased to hear you say he isn't. I understood he might be, but I'm very glad he isn't. I think it would be very ill-advised. Independent candidates at European Parliament elections really have no hope at all, and it would do his self-esteem and confidence no good whatsoever.
And I wanted to ask you about him as a colleague and maybe even a friend. What's it been like working with him out here in the European Parliament? And is it someone that you're going to miss from within the party?
Well, I knew him for quite a long time before I came into this European Parliament. And I knew him as a man who had got the guts and the balls to help get a brand new party going in the north of England, because he's based in Yorkshire where we weren't particularly strong at all. And he came out of a well-paid job. And he turned his pockets out for our party to get us going there, just using sheer personality and courage. That man has got a lot of courage. He got us a seat in Yorkshire in 2004, which wasn't expected. It wasn't expected, and we quite possibly could have had two last time, but the British National Party did particularly well, but we're expected to collapse, and we may pick up a seat from them. Many people are unaware that he spent many years of his life in the TA, the Territorial Army. In other words, at the drop of a hat, he would have gone out and risked his life for his country. Now, a lot of the people who criticise him would not have done that themselves. And I immediately have an instinctive respect for anyone who's done that, because I spent a short time in the army myself and I understand all that that means. Another thing that Godfrey regularly did was to support injured troops in the hospitals. He was also very supportive, people may be surprised about this, of women in sport. He was very keen to see more women in competitive sport, women's rugby in particular. So I'm talking of him actually as a colleague who's almost died in a way, because that's how I feel. And it's ended very, very badly, but UKIP has to be a professional party, and we simply cannot carry on with somebody who isn't behaving professionally. It is as simple as that.
And presumably from what you're saying, you wouldn't therefore condone the kind of comments that he was making, that you believe that the party shouldn't be making those kind of comments. There's been talk in the past, for example, of professionalising the party. Do you think this is a step in that direction, perhaps?
Yes, it is a step in the direction of professionalising the party. At the same time, it shuts down free spirits and free debate, which is something that we stand for. But that a line has to be drawn somewhere, and Godfrey has crossed the line 2 or 3 times, and really he only has himself to blame for what's happened. We have to work as a team, and we can't keep having the distractions of having to defend the comments and really irrelevant outbursts of one particular person within the party.
This wasn't the first outburst from him. Do you think someone should have picked up on these things earlier, and perhaps do you think this could all have been avoided? He could have in the end remained a UKIP member.
It could have been avoided if he was denied the slot of a fringe meeting. I mean, that's what triggered all of this. And he made some comments a month or two ago which weren't very clever, and we all had to go out and talk about that. However, the decision was made to give him a slot, to give him a fringe meeting, where he felt probably that was his show, and people were expecting a bit of a show, a little bit of entertainment, 1950s stand-up comedy. That's what Godfrey represented, really. The things he says now would have been quite acceptable in the 1950s, and that was his problem, really, that he hadn't sort of moved on from that. He was 6 weeks younger than me, but he would affect to be 16 years older in his approach and his attitudes to things, and things do move on. I mean, look at modern tech speak. Us oldie fuddy-duddies really complain about that, but actually in 30 years' time the English language will probably change to something like that. And we have to accept it, we have to move on, and most of the voters are well under the age of 64 or 63, which Godfrey is at the moment, and we have to try and appeal to the average person, if there is such a thing.
And just finally, what do you think the impact will be at the election in his constituency in Yorkshire? If he does stand, for example, as an independent, is there a risk that could upset the vote, the UKIP vote in Yorkshire?
Statistically, yes, that there is a risk. I think it's a tiny one, but you could find that his vote, the vote he receives as an independent, deprives us as a second seat, but I would have said the chances of that are infinitesimal. I would advise him and urge him just to forget about it. Independent candidates are humiliated at the European Parliament elections. They get nowhere, and there really is no point in doing it unless you want to try and damage UKIP, which is, whatever he may think of the personalities within the party, it's what we stand for. He actually stands for that as well, and that's getting us out of this European Union, away from here. And I'm sure that he will think to himself over the next few months, does he really want to weaken that philosophy?